The rain fell in a steady sheet, drumming on the hood of Jake Miller's rusted sedan. His headlights cut weak beams through the darkness of rural Kentucky, illuminating little more than slick asphalt and skeletal trees swaying in the wind. It was close to midnight, and his eyes ached from driving 10 hours straight. The green glow of the dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. Jake cursed under his breath. He'd promised himself he'd reach Cincinnati by tonight, but exhaustion had already begun to creep into his bones like a drug. His stomach growled, his back ached, and his eyelids kept fluttering closed despite the coffee he'd chugged at the last gas station. That's when he saw it. A neon sign, glowing through the storm like a beacon. Miller's Crossing Motel, vacancy. The letters flickered occasionally, the M sputtering out, making it look like Iller's Crossing. Jake exhaled with relief. A bed, even in a rundown place, was better than wrapping his car around a tree. He flicked on his blinker and turned down the narrow gravel driveway that led to the motel. The building came into view, a long, one-story strip of rooms with faded blue paint, water-stained siding, and a buzzing overhead light that cast everything in a sickly yellow hue. There were maybe 6 cars parked in the lot, though most looked like they hadn't been moved in days. Jake pulled into a spot near the office. The sign on the door read open in peeling red letters. Inside, a single bulb illuminated the check-in counter. A thin, gray-haired man sat behind it, staring at an old television that buzzed with static. The bell above the door jingled as Jake walked in, dripping rain onto the floor. The man's head jerked up. His eyes were pale blue, almost too pale, and they locked on Jake like a predator sizing up prey. "Need a room?" he rasped. Jake nodded. "Yeah, just for the night. Bad storm out there." The man didn't smile, didn't blink, he just slid a paper ledger across the counter. "Write your name, $25, cash only." Jake pulled a crumpled bill from his wallet and signed his name. As the man pocketed the money, Jake noticed something odd about the ledger. Nearly all the names were from years ago. 2016, 2012, even one from 1998. The most recent before his was from March of this year, 6 months ago. The man slid a key across the counter. A tarnished brass key with a red plastic tag. Room 6. Jake frowned. "Thanks. You got any vending machines around?" The man's lips curled upward, though it wasn't quite a smile. "Stay out of room 6, he said flatly. Jake blinked. "What?" The man pushed the key closer. "You want a safe night, take room 5. Or room 7, just not 6. Never 6. A chill rippled through Jake. He gave a nervous laugh. "But, this says 6. The man leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You asked for a bed. I gave you a warning. What you do next is on you." Jake swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to laugh it off, but exhaustion drowned his better judgment. Maybe the old guy was just screwing with him. Maybe it was some local superstition. Either way, Jake took the key. He left the office with the rain still pounding, the storm wrapping the motel in a cocoon of darkness. Room 6 was 3 doors down. Its door looked just like the others, weather-beaten, paint peeling, a brass number nailed above the frame. Jake hesitated only a second before jamming the key into the lock. The door creaked open, and the smell hit him first. Stale, damp, like mildew mixed with something faintly metallic. He clicked the light switch, and a weak yellow bulb hummed to life overhead. The room was ordinary enough. A queen bed with a faded floral comforter, a dresser with a bolted-down TV, a nightstand with a Bible half buried under dust. But something was wrong. The air felt heavier inside, pressing on his chest. The corners of the room seemed darker than they should have been, as though the light couldn't quite reach them. Jake set his bag down and muttered, "One night. Just one night." As he shut the door, he thought he heard something, a whisper, so faint it might have been the wind. But it wasn't outside, it was inside the room. Jake tossed his duffel bag onto the bed, wincing at the groan of the old springs. The rain outside hadn't let up, it rattled against the thin glass window in relentless waves, drowning out most other sounds. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. His head felt heavy, and for a moment, he thought about driving back to the office and demanding a different room. But he reminded himself of how ridiculous it would sound. "Sorry, can I switch?" The creepy old guy told me room 6 is haunted. Instead, Jake pulled off his jacket, kicked off his shoes, and flopped backward onto the bed. The comforter smelled faintly of mothballs and something sour, but he was too tired to care. He reached for the remote on the nightstand and clicked on the TV. Snowy static filled the screen. He flipped through the channels, nothing but dead air. Every channel, Figures, Jake muttered. He shut it off, and silence swallowed the room. Almost silence. There it was again, a whisper. Faint, almost inaudible. Jake froze, listening hard. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the hum of the light. This was different. Jake, his name, clear as day. He bolted upright, heart hammering. Hello? Silence. He stood, scanning the room. His eyes landed on the bathroom door. It was cracked open an inch. He was sure he'd closed it when he came in. His throat went dry. He crossed the room slowly, every step creaking on the warped floorboards. He pushed the bathroom door open. The light flickered on automatically. Empty. The mirror above the sink was cloudy with streaks, but for a split second, Jake thought he saw something behind him in the reflection. A shadow. Too tall, too thin. He spun around. Nothing there. Jake exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the sink. You're overtired. That's all this is. He shut off the light and pulled the bathroom door closed firmly. When he turned back toward the bed, he froze. The comforter was rumpled, different than when he'd left it, like someone had sat down on it. Jake's stomach knotted. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but he forced a laugh instead. Old man's warnings just screwing with me. He sat on the bed again and tried to calm his breathing. He checked his phone. No signal. Of course, places like this were black holes for reception. At 12:32 a.m., Jake finally lay down, pulling the thin blanket over himself. Exhaustion pulled him under fast, but his sleep was restless. Dreams came quickly. Dark corridors, locked doors, and a voice, always whispering his name. When Jake's eyes snapped open, the room was pitch black. The bulb overhead had gone out. The rain had stopped, leaving a silence that pressed against his ears. He checked his phone. 3:07 a.m. Something moved in the corner of the room. Jake's chest seized. He could feel it before he saw it, something shifting in the shadows. Slowly, his eyes adjusted. A figure, tall, motionless, its outline just barely visible in the darkness near the dresser. Jake tried to speak, but his throat locked. The figure tilted its head, and then, in a voice like dry leaves scraping across pavement, it whispered, "Why did you come to room 6? Jake scrambled for the lamp on the nightstand, his hand shaking. The bulb sputtered to life, casting its weak yellow glow across the room. The figure was gone. Jake's breath came in shallow gasps. His chest ached, his skin prickled with cold sweat. He scanned every corner of the room, his pulse thundering in his ears. Nothing, just shadows. He grabbed his duffel, ready to bolt. He didn't care if it was raining, didn't care if he had to sleep in the car. He needed out, but when he reached the door, he froze. The lock, it wouldn't turn. Jake rattled it violently, the metal clanking. Come on, come on. The knob wouldn't budge. Behind him, the whisper came again, closer this time. Stay. Jake spun, pressing his back to the door. The TV flickered on by itself, blaring static at full volume. The snowy screen glowed, casting warped light across the walls. And in the static, just barely, Jake saw faces. Distorted, screaming faces. Dozens of them, mouths open in silent wails. Jake lunged forward and yanked the plug from the wall. The screen went black. The silence afterward was worse. Jake stood there, panting, every nerve in his body screaming. He didn't sleep again that night. When dawn finally seeped through the thin curtains, pale and gray, Jake shoved his things into his bag and stormed out of room 6. The office door creaked as he shoved it open. The old man was there, exactly as before, sitting behind the counter. He didn't look surprised to see Jake. If anything, he looked almost expectant. You stayed, the man said flatly. Jake slammed the key onto the counter. What the hell is wrong with that room? The man's pale eyes narrowed. I told you not to go in. Something's in there, Jake snapped. I don't even know what I saw, but it wasn't human. The old man didn't answer right away. He just looked at Jake like someone might look at a car wreck they've seen too many times before. Finally, he said, no one stays in room 6. Not twice. Jake stared at him. Then why rent it out? The man's mouth twitched into something like a smile, but it never touched his eyes. Sometimes the room chooses. Not me. Jake's blood ran cold. Jake left the office in a daze. The morning light should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It was flat, gray, lifeless, like the world itself was drained of warmth. He tossed his duffel bag into the car and sat behind the wheel, gripping it so tight his knuckles whitened. His rational brain screamed at him to drive, to put miles between himself and that cursed strip of rooms. But something else, something he didn't want to admit, kept him rooted. The old man's words wouldn't leave his head. Sometimes the room chooses. Jake started the engine. The radio clicked on automatically, static filling the speakers. He twisted the dial. No stations. Nothing but that same crackle and hiss. Then, faintly, beneath the static, Jake, he slapped the radio off, heart hammering. His eyes drifted back to the row of rooms. Room 6 sat there innocently, its peeling paint and crooked number no different from the others. But Jake knew. He felt it. That room was watching him. He put the car in drive, but his foot hesitated on the gas. Then, against all logic, he found himself climbing back out, slamming the door behind him. The diner sat half a mile down the road, its neon sign flickering in the damp morning. Jake ordered coffee and eggs, though his stomach churned too hard to eat. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, poured his coffee without a smile. "Rough night?" she asked, eyeing the dark circles under his eyes. Jake hesitated. "Stayed at Miller's Crossing, room 6. The woman froze mid-pour. Her hand trembled, spilling a little coffee onto the counter. "You stayed in that room?" Jake frowned. "You know about it?" She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Everyone around here knows. We tell travelers not to stop there. Some don't listen." Jake swallowed. "What happened in that room?" Her eyes darted around the diner, as if making sure no one else was listening. First it was the Anderson couple. Back in the 80s, they checked in on their way to Louisville. Next morning, the maid found them in the bed. Dead, sheets soaked through, no sign of struggle, no wounds. Just gone, like the life had been sucked right out of him. Jake's stomach flipped. Then it was a salesman in the 90s. Same thing. Then a college kid. Then a trucker. People go in, but they don't come out the same. If they come out at all. Jake forced down bile. So why doesn't anyone shut it down? Burn it to the ground? The woman shook her head slowly. They tried. Town council condemned the building in '94. Tore the room apart, walls, floors, ceiling. But every time, it just went back. Like nothing had touched it. By the next week, the room was whole again. Same as before. Sheriff says it ain't possible, but everyone around here knows better. Jake stared into his coffee, his reflection rippling in the dark liquid. His skin crawled with every word. The waitress finally leaned back, her expression hard. "You should leave. Forget that place. Folks who get curious never fare well." Jake nodded, but deep down, he knew he wasn't leaving. Not yet. By the time Jake pulled back into the motel lot, the rain had started again, soft at first, then pounding. His rational mind screamed, "Drive, you idiot. Leave now." But his hands guided him toward room 6. The old man was standing outside the office, as if waiting. His pale eyes followed Jake without surprise. "You came back," he said quietly. Jake clenched his fists. "What is it? What's in that room?" The man didn't answer right away. He lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating the deep lines on his face. Smoke curled from his lips as he finally said, "It's not what's in the room. It's what the room is." Jake frowned. "That doesn't make any sense." The man's gaze hardened. "You want answers? Then go back in. The room will show you. But once it does, you'll wish you'd never asked." Jake's pulse thudded in his ears. He should have walked away, but the pull was stronger now, an invisible hook lodged deep in his chest. Without another word, he walked back to room 6. The key turned too easily this time, like the lock wanted him inside. The smell hit him immediately, stronger now. Damp, rot, and beneath it all, that faint metallic tang of blood. The air was heavier than before, thick enough to choke. Jake stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He stood in the center of the room, waiting. At first, nothing, just silence. Then the TV flickered on again, though Jake hadn't touched it. The snowy static danced across the screen. And then, images began to form. The Anderson couple, faces pale, eyes wide in terror. The salesman, clutching his chest, gasping. The college kid, curled on the floor, blood at the corner of her mouth. The trucker, slumped in the chair, skin gray. Jake stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. The voices came next, a cacophony of whispers, layered on top of each other until they grew into a scream. "Leave, leave, leave." Jake clutched his head, pain stabbing through his skull. The wall seemed to pulse around him, the corners of the room stretching, twisting. Then, silence. On the screen, one final image appeared. Jake, standing in room 6, but in the reflection of the static, behind him, something loomed. Tall, twisted, hollow-eyed. Jake spun. The room went black. When Jake opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor. The lamp was shattered, the air thick and suffocating. The figure stood over him. Its body was impossibly thin, its skin stretched tight over bone. Empty sockets stared down at him, and its mouth opened wider than any human mouth should. "Why did you come?" it whispered. Jake's throat closed, his voice barely a rasp. "What are you?" The figure crouched low, its face inches from his. Its breath was ice. "I am hunger," it hissed. "And this room is my mouth." Jake tried to crawl backward, but the floor seemed to grip him, holding him down. The shadows in the corners thickened, stretching like hands. They wrapped around his ankles, his wrists, pulling him toward the bed. He screamed, thrashing, but the sound was swallowed instantly. The last thing Jake saw was the figure's mouth stretching wider, wider, until it was nothing but darkness. Then, silence. Part 7. The Next Traveler. The storm had passed by morning. The motel sat in the weak sunlight, looking as ordinary and tired as ever. The old man sat behind the counter in the office, smoking another cigarette. The bell above the door jingled. A young woman stepped inside, brushing rain from her jacket. "Hey, do you have a room?" "Just for one night." The old man didn't smile. He slid the ledger across the counter. "Cash only." She signed her name. The man reached under the counter and pulled out a tarnished brass key with a red plastic tag. He set it down between them. "Room 6. His pale eyes met hers. "You want a safe night," he said slowly. "Take room 5. Or room 7. Just not 6. Never 6. The woman laughed lightly. "Thanks for the warning, but I'll be fine." She picked up the key. And outside, the neon sign flickered. Iller's Crossing Motel, vacancy.